Welcome to the Screenplay Lab. I am your host, Jeff Barker. I'm a screenwriter, and this is a podcast where we study and appreciate the standalone beauty of the screenplay as an independent literary piece, not just a blueprint for the film. We take one screenplay, we break it down, we deconstruct it, we find out what's unique about it, and we discover what we can learn from the screenplay. And this week, our screenplay is another Oscar-nominated screenplay, Anora by Sean Baker, nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, that's also Sean Baker, Best Film Editing, he did that too, Sean Baker, Best Actress, Mikey Madison, who was just unbelievable in the film, and also Best Supporting Actor, Yura Borsov, and what we care most about on this podcast, Best Original Screenplay. So we have a lot to look at on this screenplay and a lot to learn. It's already picked up quite a bit of hardware, including winning the Critics' Choice Award, Best Picture last week, also Producers Guild of America, Best Film, and Cannes Film Festival in 2024. That's what got the ball rolling on this movie. This screenplay is a romantic drama turned thriller with a dash of comedy and, of course, social commentary, and I really enjoyed it. And we begin by talking about the author, who in this case is also the director, and that is Sean Baker. He is from New Jersey, just like Jesse Eisenberg, who he featured on another episode. And he went to film school at NYU, so off to a good start. Also married to Samantha Kwan, who's an actor and a producer. She does a lot of production for his films, but she also does her own thing, has an outstanding reputation in Hollywood. He started in television. He was a co-creator for a sitcom that ended up on Fox, Greg the Bunny. You probably remember that. So he has quite the sense of humor, and that definitely shows up in this screenplay. And as a screenwriter and a filmmaker, he has specialized in writing character-driven stories about marginalized communities living out of sight on the fringes of society. He is really good at this, and especially interested in sex work. Sex work shows up in his last 4 films, his 4 major movies, and he always portrays it with dignity and respect and understands what's going on in the sex trade. And he is an advocate for decriminalizing sex work. His breakthrough film was Tangerine in 2015, and it was co-written with Chris Burgos. And it was shot entirely on an iPhone 5S, which is pretty cool. It was about transgendered sex workers in Los Angeles. So there we go. And in 2017, he and Burgos wrote The Florida Project, which I know that you'll remember. It's about a desperate young mother living in a motel next to Disney World, and she turns to sex work to provide for her child. Red Rocket in 2021 is about a former adult film star who returns back to their hometown in Texas and nobody wants them. And then, of course, Anora is about a sex worker in New York, and this is so far his crown jewel. Let's talk quickly about how it was developed. Baker was impressed with actress Mikey Madison after watching her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. By the way, can we just say the amount of young talent in Quentin Tarantino's 2019 film is unbelievable. Now, they were all pretty much relatively unknown, and now megastars. Mikey Madison, who we're going to learn a lot about today, now nominated for Best Actress. Margaret Qualley, who we just talked about a couple weeks ago in another episode because of The Substance. Also, she's in Kinds of Kindness, which is a great movie. Sydney Sweeney, a megastar, probably most known for Euphoria, White Lotus, but she's starring in movies now as well. Austin Butler, Golden Globe winner, portrayed Elvis Presley, also did Dune 2, Masters of the Air, The Bike Riders, and many more to come. Not only were they all in the movie, but they were all in the Manson family. They were all in the same scenes together as these relatively unknown actors. The only one who was pretty well established was also Dakota Fanning. Add her to the group, but she's grown since then. So it got me wondering who in the world was the casting director for that film. And it was the legend, Victoria Thomas. I mean, she just did Nickel Boys. She did The Morning Show. She cast for The Last of Us, True Detective, Bosch, one of my favorite shows. But she has 146 credits. I mean, my goodness, we can't go through all of them. So if you're putting a movie together, you might want to call Victoria Thomas and find out who all the hot young talent is out there in Hollywood. So anyway, Baker was so impressed with Mikey Madison that he told her he had an idea for a film and he would write the screenplay for her if she would agree to be in the movie. Of course, she said yes. I shouldn't say of course. Some people might say, no, let's see what you got first. But he had quite the reputation already. So Baker went to work writing and she went to work learning Russian, learning the Brooklyn accent, learning the art of exotic dancing, hanging out with professional adult dancers, and then it was off to the races. Also worth noting that Baker hired a creative consultant while he wrote the screenplay. Her name's Andrea Werhan, and she's a former sex worker known for her memoir, Modern Whore. And I believe she stayed on with him throughout the filming of the movie as well and played an integral part in understanding the culture of the exotic dancer, the sex worker. And the screenplay was completed in November of 2022, and filming began in February of 2023, so only like 3 months later. 37-day shoot, so pretty quick for the amount of scenes in this screenplay. In fact, they took 10 days just to shoot the scenes in the home invasion scene in the mansion. $6 million. That was the budget. And this movie's already made, I don't know, 36 million or so at the box office so far, plus all the buzz it's getting from Oscars, no telling how much it's going to make. So a pretty good investment. And it was distributed by one of the newer powerhouses of our industry, Neon. They do a lot of horror films, but not just horror. They do prestige films as well. Parasite last year. Was that last year? Or 2 years ago? I, Tonya, Palm Springs, which I really like that movie. All right, we begin with the log line as we always do. And the official log line of this film is a young sex worker from Brooklyn meets and impulsively marries the son of an oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as the parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. That is what happened. Okay, here is my take on it. I always take an opportunity to practice log lines because they're very important. A Brooklyn sex worker fights for love and independence against insurmountable odds when billionaire Russian oligarchs race to New York to shatter her whirlwind marriage to their son. All right, here we go. To the pages, formatting, mechanics, and style. We start off, we open up the screenplay, and the first thing that jumps out at us is this huge 10-line block of text right here on page 1. And Baker is using this to set the scene. He is describing the gentleman's club, and he does it more like pins on a map rather than brush to canvas. Here's what I'm talking about. Look at this. He says, there are 50 girls and 15 guys downstairs and 20 girls and 5 guys upstairs. Throughout the club are 3 security guards, a DJ, the owner's right-hand man, and the music is so loud that everyone is essentially shouting at all times. So he's putting people, casting them in certain spots where they need to be. And there's no actual dialogue boxes for the first 12 scenes of the screenplay. Not until page 3 do we get a dialogue box. Instead, Baker opts for describing what is being said like you would find if you were reading prose. This gives him some freedom to be able to pull some strings and make some adjustments on shooting. It's the only time where this really happens in the screenplay. There are other times where he describes what's being said, what people are saying to each other. But this was very deliberate, and I believe he had a plan. Here's what we're talking about on page 1. It says, Annie sweet talks a businessman, 50s, into getting a dance. So rather than giving her lines to say, it just lets us know that she's going to be talking to him. In the film, she does talk to this guy. She has lines. I don't know if they were given to her or if she ad-libs, but there they are. But I believe all of this was because he had plans for a one of these tracking shots that goes in and out of conversations and picks up everything that's happening. It didn't happen, or at least it didn't happen the way he wanted it to on the page, because look here, there's remnants of this plan in the screenplay. On page 3, it says, we roll without a cut for 10 minutes. So that didn't happen, but that was how he envisioned this scene, at least in the beginning. So we have this prose style of describing dialogue, and then at other times he gets very specific about dialogue, even though it's not actually what shows up in the film most of the time. You have these four characters that go on this journey together, Annie, Garnix, Toros, and Igor, and they argue a lot. They talk over each other a lot. The lines are quick. And we get the spirit of what he means for them to say in the screenplay. It's not exactly what shows up in the film, but it's important to him to have it in the screenplay so that everyone gets an idea of what the conversation is and how it's going to go. He doesn't seem overly concerned about length of the screenplay. This one's 137 pages, 184 scenes. Although it does turn out to be pretty much spot on, the runtime of the film is 139 minutes. He opts for using parentheticals to describe the language that's being spoken when it's outside of English, which would be the Russian or the Armenian. This is a common option that screenwriters will choose to use when there are multiple languages being spoken. Another option is to put in the action line that the following conversation is in Russian. That's at Tatiana's grill when Toros takes the microphone. It says on 91, everything Toros says, he repeats in Russian. But most of the time, 99% of the time in the screenplay, it's like here on 48, where it says, we see here that the Russian in the parenthetical indicating that this is in Russian. And there are 4 montages in this screenplay. And the interesting thing about it is that he does all 4 montages 4 different ways on the page. Let's look at it. Page 28, this is when the friends are partying, that montage to showcase Ivan and Ani's week together. Rather than describe the shot after shot, scene after scene, it just says, we show 7 club interiors and 4 exteriors. So he's just sort of like laying it out there as a game plan. Then on page 37, we have the just married montage. And here he puts the spirit of what he wants for a montage in a single paragraph, but doesn't call for any specific shots. He just says, this is what's going on, and I'll get the shots later. On page 40, 41, this is the newly married montage where they're learning how to be married to each other. This is closer to the more mainstream way of how you would see it, where he names it, he describes it, and he lists it as action points. And if the scene changes, you go ahead and put a scene header in there. And then there's a 4th way. On page 96, this montage is when they're looking for Ivan. They're going all over the place. This time he includes all the locations in the action line rather than separating them out into scenes. Look at this here. It says the next section plays out as a montage as the crew scours Brighton Beach, Coney Island, Sheephead Bay, looking for Ivan. The crew hits restaurants and he names them, specific places, bars, names them, with interesting interactions with staff and regulars as they ask if anyone has seen Ivan. Toros shows the Insta photo to everyone. No luck. So 4 different ways. So if you're wondering, how do I do a montage in my screenplay? Well, there's a lot of ways you can do it. You could pick this one up and you get 4 examples. And we like to look at direction on the page to see what's there, what's not there, so we could form our own thoughts and opinions about if we want to include it in our screenplays or not. The action line we see, which puts us in the perspective of the camera, shows up 4 times in the screenplay, which honestly is about average for most screenplays that I've read, between 1 and 5 times. Recently, though, looking at all these Oscar-nominated screenplays, we've been seeing 20, 30, even up to 40 per script. And you may say, well, these were writer-directors. Okay, but so is he. But he opted to be pretty minimal with it. Here's an example on page 43. We see the flash of a cell phone off screen coming from the coffee table, and he looks at it. He also mentions specific shots, but only 3 times in the screenplay. And again, we've been seeing a lot of that in the screenplays that we've been breaking down. He opts to not do it very much. He mentions 2 close-up shots and 1 helicopter shot. There's the helicopter shot. It's on page 41. It says, the helicopter shot is a pullback from the mansion's balcony as the newlyweds enjoy their marital bliss. And this was a pivotal scene in the film as well, because this is at the height of joy. Clearly, this is the second act split. Everything's going great. The marital bliss. And then cut to Alex's mother calling Toros at church. And now we descend into the second half. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to tell you what made this screenplay worthy of an Oscar nomination. Hi. If you're enjoying this so far, I'm so very grateful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment. Leave a review if you're listening to the podcast. That helps a lot. You can watch this on YouTube. Also, the best way to keep up with me is at my website, jeff-barker.com. But I'm on all the socials, easy to find. You can also go to Substack and subscribe to my newsletter where I break down these screenplays with even more detail than what we can talk about on the podcast. All right, thanks for the time. Now back to the program.
Thank you for watching my dad's podcast.
This is why I believe that this screenplay was nominated for an Oscar and why it was worthy to be nominated for an Oscar. Sean Baker took a compelling and very good screenplay and he added this final scene that makes it magnificent. I knew something big was going to happen at the end of this screenplay. You could just feel it. It was undeniable, the momentum, the way it was heading toward the end. What I really thought was a big twist. I wasn't exactly sure what it would be. My best guess was that Annie and Igor were actually working together the whole time to defraud this family. But he gives us something way better. He gives us an emotional peak, this symbolic, emotional climax that represents a full pivotal moment in Anora's journey towards self-awareness and emotional authenticity. I'd like to show you the whole clip, but I can't because of what all happens in it, but here's a taste.
Car is very you.
Do you like it?
No.
It's my grandmother's.
So what's happening here? I'll tell you what I think. Igor, he offers a true act of kindness by giving her the 4-carat diamond ring, which I had to look it up. I don't even know what those things are worth, but upwards to $250,000 even. And by the way, Diamond, remember who Annie's main rival is in the story? The other exotic dancer, Diamond. I don't think that was an accident. Annie tries to compliment Igor in this scene to say, you know, this car is very you. And that's really the best she can manage at the time. But remember, her entire career as an adult dancer is to put on this mask and say nice things to men that she doesn't really mean. So she is feeling very vulnerable because of this gift, basically, that he's given her, this kindness. And she doesn't really understand her emotions at the time or how to deal with it. But Igor presses her a little and she cracks. So she admits that she doesn't like the car. This is where she's fading back and forth on the fence between who she was when the screenplay started and who she is now as her arc has been fully developed. Back and forth. And then we come to one of the most beautiful parts of the scene, and that is the silence. I mean, we do have the windshield wiper, weep boop, weep boop. That actually amplifies the silence, though. That was a good device that Baker uses there as a director, and he puts it on the page as well. But anyway, we have this silence, and Annie, she knows that Igor, sitting next to her, desires her, wants to be with her, but he's giving her this space, letting her be in her own bubble, not forcing himself onto her the way all the other men in her life have. She is in emotional pain here. She's vulnerable. And it's all too much. So she climbs into his lap and she grasps at her most comfortable defense mechanism. So she transitions into her sexualized self, putting on this mask. And this is a way to hide from her pain. As long as she's engaging in this transactional relationship, she doesn't have to deal with her true emotions. But Igor isn't playing along. He only wants intimacy here with Annie. Not sex, but true intimacy. she sees this in his eyes, that he wants to kiss her. He wants to be intimate with her, truly intimate. And it breaks her. This makes her angry. This brute who sees her as a complete person, not a sexual toy. She can't handle it. She is forced in that moment to face her vulnerability and experience the fulfillment of her emotional growth. This is a beautiful scene. This is the secret sauce. This is what elevates this screenplay and makes it worthy of an Oscar nomination. Cheers to you, Sean Baker. All right, now the writing. A thumbprint of Baker's writing is that he is primarily using present participles rather than verbs in his action lines. Okay, don't click away. It's not an English class. But if you remember, present participles are words that act as verbs and they end in ing. You use them in your writing. I use them in my writing. But what is unique about him, and the reason why it's his fingerprint, and if I read another script blind, I would know if it was him or not, is he uses it a lot. And, well, let's just look at it. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Page 3, it says, Annie is eating dinner from a Tupperware container while scrolling on her phone. Lulu is sitting in front of the mirror next to two other dancers. They are doing their makeup and vaping. Another way to write this would be, Annie eats dinner from a Tupperware container while she scrolls on her phone. Lulu sits in front of the mirror next to two other dancers. They do their makeup and vape. You see the difference there? That, I believe, is his thumbprint and unique to him. Another thing to point out is that he is masterful when it comes to adding slapstick comedy to a serious drama. It is not easy. This is a high level of difficulty to be able to give some laughs to the reader and eventually the audience in a way that relieves stress and anxiety about the seriousness of the story, but doesn't take away from the seriousness and the importance of the story. One joke too many or too far, and it becomes ridiculous. I believe he threaded the needle perfectly with this one. He didn't go too far, but there was enough in there that made me literally laugh out loud. He is funny. You can see where he got his start in comedy. I'm not surprised. Some of them to remember here are Toros at the church doing the newborn sacrament with the baby and the robe, and his phone's going off, and he's texting, and everybody's looking at him, and he just hands the baby off. He's like, I gotta go. That was funny. Refusing to allow the Escalade to be towed. I haven't seen that. It's one of these things when you see it, you think, I'm surprised I hadn't seen that before. I mean, nobody wants to get towed. The fight scene at the mansion invasion was both horrifying and funny at the same time. And then the aftermath of that, when Toro shows up, also funny. Here's a quick clip.
Why did you tie her hands?
One time.
Look. Why are you afraid of this little girl?
She's an animal.
She's a fucking little girl. She beat you both up?
She's not fighting like one.
Can you untie her?
If you untie her, I'm just leaving, bro.
This is ridiculous, man. Untie her. It's embarrassing.
There's also all of the interactions between Annie and Diamond, which are pretty hilarious. The fight at the Gentleman's Club, funny. Also the confrontation and the destruction of the vape shop with the golf club, hilarious. You notice, if you haven't read the screenplay, you're like, what? Because in the film, it's a candy shop and a baseball bat, but it's not that in the screenplay. And finally, the courthouse scene is spot on funny. The judge is funny. All the characters are just hilarious. And that also plays out well on the screen. My favorite is actually a cut back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between two scenes. And it's really great on the page. And it translates in the film as well. Toros is lecturing these young people. They're drunk at like a diner, and he's telling them that their generation is, no good. And at the same time, we go back and forth to the dance club where Diamond is getting ready to give a lap dance to Ivan. And so this represents a snapshot of the big picture tone of what's going on here. We have Diamond and Ivan in this devastating, tense, sad, like anxiety-inducing scene because he shouldn't be there and he's betraying her in the most horrible way that you could portray someone. And at the same time, we cut back to this comic relief. Baker cuts back and forth between these two scenes 6 times, and it works. Well, let's look at page 102. This is Diamond is saying that she's going to show Ivan a good time, and then cut to Toros, and he says, no work ethic, lazy, stupid, arrogant, uneducated, TikTok all day, Instagram, spoiled. What's wrong with you? I've been working since 16 years old. And it was really funny. I don't appreciate the Karen joke, but that's me. I get highly offended by that. If you study and break this screenplay down, a couple of things, unique things will pop out to you. There are a few lines in the screenplay that are out of order. I'm guessing that scenes were moved, or beats were moved, not scenes, but beats inside the scenes. And maybe something didn't get modified or deleted. This is the remnants of that. For example, on page 76, Toros threatens Annie with the red scarf, which is a significant prop in this screenplay. But there is no red scarf. It hasn't been introduced yet. It actually doesn't show up until 2 pages later on page 78, where it says, Toros runs to the closet in the foyer and grabs a designer red scarf. It is clear that this is the introduction of the scarf, because it doesn't say the scarf. It says a designer red scarf. And also the way he threatened her with it was like that he had it. There are 2 more on page 88. One is here where it says Annie is obviously very upset about being hung up on, but in the most recent version of the screenplay, there is no hanging up. The calls just go straight to voicemail. And also on 88, we see that during the confrontation at the vape shop, it says Tom struggles on the floor in pain, but Tom is not accosted in any way otherwise in the screenplay or in the film. That tells me there was most likely a previous draft where he was, and this is just left as a little crumb. Obviously, Annie is the main character, Honora, and she is great on the page, magnificent on the screen. But to me, Igor is this very three-dimensional character. Baker really shapes this character for us by showing us so many sides of him. You know, he's a linchpin, he's a brute, he's an aggressive and violent person. But we get to see that he wants to swing by his apartment and get some oxy so that he can help this guy out who's in pain. Baker shows us his humanity and his effort and his curiosity, and he does this throughout the screenplay, and poor Igor keeps getting yelled at every time he tries to help. This is what really got me thinking throughout the screenplay. This guy's an important character. He's not just a linchpin. And that's why I knew something big was going to happen, but it wasn't what I expected. It was even better.
I'm Igor. You?
Annie.
Feeling it slow over the stream.
You'll get cold if you don't cover your neck.
Affection, now you're above. Feeling it still. Tell me it's love. Tell me it's real. Touch me with a kiss. Feel me. I wanna be where it's so sweet and heavenly.
I like Honora. I mean, I like Honora more than Annie.
Nuanced storytelling versus exposition, and Sean Baker's writing style does lend itself to some on-the-nose exposition. Here are a couple examples. On 73, it says he calls and it goes to voicemail. This is another indication to Annie that Yvonne does not care for her well-being. And then on 58, it says, it strikes Annie at this moment that her new life could be taken away in a flash. Baker does a tremendous job with his use of setting. The screenplay has this throbbing, vibrant sense of setting. This isn't just your generic backdrop. Everything feels lived in, feels authentic. We're at the high-end Manhattan Gentlemen's Club. Then we're at Brighton Beach with this significant Russian-speaking population. The mansion And Mill Basin is also its own character in the story. In fact, if this were an anti-Cinderella story, the mansion would be Prince Charming's castle. And then on top of that, you can mix in the risky, overindulgent land of poor choices, the Vegas Strip. When I was reading this, I started thinking about Cinderella, and I thought I was going to sound really smart and come on here and be like, lay it out, be like, this is the parallel of the anti-Cinderella story. But obviously, I wasn't the only one who thought of that. In fact, it was so obvious that Baker decides to point it out in the film. And nowhere in the screenplay is it mentioned, but in the film, after they get married, Annie is back at the gentleman's club with her old friends, and she's saying, I want to go on a honeymoon to Orlando, to Disney World, see Cinderella. I was like, oh, okay. So he's actually just almost making fun of it because it's so obvious. But the color red, like my microphone, is almost in every scene. On the page is red, red, red. And then when you watch the film, which I did after I read the screenplay, it's in there a lot. Almost every scene it's in there. And when it is, it's framed with blue and white and these dull colors. Red, white, and blue, the American dream. So again, I don't believe that was accident as either. Very purposeful with what Baker is doing here. Nora's name is also symbolic in the screenplay. It keeps coming up. People don't understand why she goes by Annie. This is actually a significant part of the conversation between her and Igor heading toward the ultimate climax. She points out that in America, the meaning of names, we don't care about that like they do in Russia. But we do know that the meaning of Nora is light in darkness. And so this symbolizes her full transformation as she becomes more aware and overcomes these difficulties and hardships. We'll look at a couple of the more beautiful lines in the screenplay. This is when Annie is looking for Yvonne and Diamond. They're all going door to door, page 105. Lots of wrong rooms and pissed off dancers and clients. Some naughty things happening behind some of those doors. Finally, Annie opens the door to the right room. They storm in. Diamond jumps off of Yvonne. Annie says, get out. Yvonne starts to get up. Toros says, not you, sit down. On page 27, Annie is telling her boss that she needs the week off. And Jimmy says, that's the boss. What? We just gave you New Year's. And Annie says, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, when I'm getting health insurance, workers' comp, and an F and 401k, you can tell me when I work and not work. This is good stuff. But my favorite dialogue of the film isn't actually in the screenplay. It's the confrontation between Diamond and Annie as she quits her job and is leaving the gentleman's club. On the page, it looks like this. On page 39, it says, it's all about to explode when Annie suddenly grabs Diamond's head and plants a big, fat, obnoxious kiss on her lips, which is really funny. Diamond immediately reacts and pushes Annie away. Annie laughs. Diamond lunges forward, but Lulu and the HQ security guard jumps in before she can connect. Annie exits into the night. So that's the part that Annie exits into the night, and that's it. But what she says on the film is my favorite line. Here it is.
Annie. Play my fucking face again, bitch.
You stay jealous, babe. Stay jealous, honey. Jealousy is a disease. Remember that, Diamond? I'm just gonna go chill in my mansion or whatever. You know, no big deal. Hey.
Now to the narrative elements, and we start with narrative styles, which is how this screenplay fits into other screenplays as far as putting it in a box, which you really can't. But one of them that it fits into is hyperrealism. These long, unbroken takes on this page and on the screen with raw dialogue that's unpolished. This is Sean Baker's style, and it really resonates. The characters, they pause, they stumble, they talk over each other. Another one is multiple perspectives. Annie is, of course, the main focus, but we do get other perspectives throughout the screenplay and the film where they break away from her and we get to learn what other people are thinking and doing. There's scenes that focus on Yvonne and Igor and Diamond and Toros and the other guy, Garnick. And another one is ambiguous ending. Nothing here is wrapped up in a bow. We get a unique slice of a person's life that's very interesting, and then we're cast out. And we don't know. We don't know what happens next with Annie. We don't know if there's a happy ending. What we do know is that she grew. She started one way and she ended another way. She grew into her agency. I want to give you a couple of tones. One is the gritty truth. Baker gives us this realism, and it feels almost voyeuristic to peek into Enora's life. And I'm not talking about the sex. I'm talking about her struggles to gain respect and agency in a world that doesn't respect her or her profession. An example of this is her work-life balance. She works at a gentleman's club, and maybe there's a fantasy of how fun that would be to get all this attention and be able to perform and make so much money. But the reality is she has an overbearing manager. She has difficult coworkers. She has disrespectful clients. She works long hours. She eats lunch breaks, Tupperware lunch breaks. So really, it's not much different than working at the convenience store. Well, maybe a little. Another tone is tenderness. Annie is so real to us because she is tough. She is guarded. She is also tender, empathetic. She humanizes everybody around her. She looks at them and listens. Feel like even though we don't know a lot about her as far as her backstory, other than that her mom lives in Miami, she has a sister who we barely read about, we still feel like we know her just because of how she is presented on the page. And the final tone would be tension and melancholy. There is a current of tension throughout the film. For me, it's the melancholy. I really felt that. Reading this screenplay to me feels like a Sunday hangover where you feel guilty about something you did the night before. It just feels sort of like I'm seeing something I shouldn't be seeing. And I'm not talking about the sex at all. I'm talking about the vulnerability and the deep personalization of Annie. It's so intimate that I almost feel like I shouldn't be watching it. Imagine your writing eliciting that sort of emotional response from a random reader. You sit down at your computer, 12-point courier, and then years later, someone watches the film and has these intense emotional reactions. So that is why we write. I identified two major themes in this screenplay. One is agency and self-determination. At the core here is Annie's struggle to define her own life. She faces these overwhelming judgments, yet remains defiant and rejects this idea that her choices make her less deserving than anyone else. And she demands respect. Another is social expectations. Don't get it twisted. This is a war of social class. Annie embodies the struggle of the working class sex worker, which is stigmatized in society. And at the same time, her foe is a Russian oligarch family worth $40 billion. The internal conflicts going on here are authenticity versus assimilation. Annie struggles to maintain herself as she enters Ivan's world, something so far from what she even knew was possible. And she feels this pressure to let go of herself and assimilate into his life, into his world. And then when she finally becomes vulnerable enough to do that, they don't want her. There's stability versus independence, where she's drawn into Ivan's financial security and the safety that comes along with that. But she struggles because that also means she has to give up part of who she is, her own independence. And then I really like this one, love versus pragmatism. Annie develops genuine feelings for Ivan. That's true. They both do at some point. But she's also aware that this is still a transactional relationship, and that's all she knows. For him, it's transactional because being with her means he gets to be American and put up the middle finger to his parents. For her, it's transactional because she is hustling so hard all the time to try to have money, have respect, see herself as at a certain place in the world. And he gives her that instantly. The external conflicts are pretty easy here. You have Annie versus Ivan's family, a clash over expectations and culture and respect. You've got working class versus privilege. She's amazed in the beginning by the opulence of what life is like for Ivan. You have independence versus dependence. Annie's personal independence clashes with the societal expectations of Ivan's wealth. And then love versus power. The authentic connection Annie and Ivan have is tested against an imbalance of power, and it fails. It doesn't work out. And we'll look at story structure. Really it fits into several different models, but we'll do the 5-act structure for this one. Act 1 is the setup, and we have the introduction of Annie, this ambitious 23-year-old sex worker that works at an upscale Manhattan club. The inciting incident is that she meets Ivan, this 21-year-old child, and he is a child of a $40 billion Russian oligarch. Ivan invites Annie into his world with life-changing opportunities. Act 2, the rising action. She begins to adapt, let her guard down. The building conflict is cultural and class differences between them starts to show up, becomes very obvious. And Annie likes what is happening and tries to pretend that the relationship is not transactional, but it is in fact on both sides a very transactional relationship. Act 3 is the turning point. They get married. Ivan's family learns about the union and they call in the dogs. Toros, who's just sort of been in the background up until now, they start getting involved in the situation. It gets out of control. Tensions rise. Ivan flees and leaves Annie, which was ridiculous. But she refuses to break down. She shows how tough she is. No one's going to break her. Most of the movie occurs during this third act as the gang gets together and they start looking for Ivan. Act 4 is the falling action. And that's when they learn that Ivan is with Diamond at her former club. And they go and find him, and his parents are going to arrive from Russia. And Annie fiercely defends the marriage, defends herself, stands up to the mother, shows how tough and strong-willed she is. But the class difference is too much, and it is impossible for what she wants. And then there's Act 5, the resolution. She sees her relationship with Ivan for what it really is, even though that is very painful. And Annie appreciates her handler, Igor, and feels obligated to initiate another transactional relationship because that's her safe place. But he shows her that he values her at a deeper level and that she's worth more than that. And then there's the ambiguous ending. She presents an emotional pain, but maintains and grows into her agency. And now that we have deconstructed the screenplay, here is just a little taste of what the words look like on the screen.
Once you give me health insurance, workers' comp, and a fucking 401k, then you can tell me when I work and not work.
Hi. Okay. You don't have cash. Let's go to the ATM.
It's not a Nora, it's Annie.
And that is Anora by Sean Baker with its 6 Academy Award nominations. And this is a gritty piece of writing, and we can see why it is nominated for Best Original Screenplay. For me, it's because of that final scene, the emotion in that scene and what we're not expecting. You can find me on jeff-barker.com, see what I'm up to. Also, I'm hanging out on all the socials. Come by, say hi. And you can go to Substack and see my breakdown of this screenplay and others. Please like and subscribe and share me. Share me with your screenwriting friends, your writing friends, your filmmaking friends, your movie-loving friends. I like them too. But most of all, thank you for being here while we break down these screenplays. So come on back. Next time I'll have another screenplay queued up right here on the Screenplay Lab.
Thank you for watching my dad's podcast.